Henry Blackwell was the kind of man who turned heads the moment he walked into a room, not just because of his wealth or his looks, though he had plenty of both, but because he carried himself with effortless confidence, the kind that made people believe he belonged to a different world entirely. He built Blackwell Innovations from the ground up, turning a college startup into a tech empire that spanned continents. People admired him, envied him, and wanted to be him. And by his side was Eleanor Blackwell, his wife of 4 years, the woman who balanced his power with grace. Eleanor wasn't just beautiful, she was warm, intelligent, and grounded, the kind of person who remembered birthdays, sent handwritten thank you notes, and asked staff about their children by name. 7 months pregnant, Eleanor glowed with the kind of beauty that no designer dress could replicate. She wore love on her face, pride in her posture, and hope in her heart. To anyone looking in, they were the perfect couple, richer than most could dream, happier than most could believe. They were frequently photographed at galas, charity events, and luxury getaways. Magazine spreads dubbed them the power couple of the decade. Eleanor would rest her hand gently on her belly, smiling up at Henry as if she could see the future, and it looked exactly like the fairy tale she thought she was living. Henry, in return, would wrap an arm around her, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh in that quiet, elegant way. They were the couple people aspired to be. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks that only become visible when you're standing close enough to feel the cold seeping through. Behind the well-lit photographs and glowing interviews was a man wrestling with temptations, and a woman unaware that love alone might not be enough to save her from what was coming. Vanessa Hart was the kind of woman who knew how to turn the world in her favor with just a glance. Tall, striking, with eyes like polished emeralds and a smile that concealed more than it revealed, she had learned early in life that beauty was power, and she wielded it like a blade. Born into modest beginnings, Vanessa was never content with average. She studied people, mimicked the wealthy, and climbed her way through every room by attaching herself to power. Charm was her currency, and manipulation was her art. She didn't believe in luck, only opportunity, and how quickly you moved when it appeared. That's exactly what she saw in Henry Blackwell, opportunity. Not just in the billions he controlled or the empire he commanded, but in the life he lived, the mansion he owned, and the woman beside him who never quite realized how vulnerable her fairy tale actually was. Years earlier, Vanessa had worked as an executive assistant at Blackwell Innovations, a sharp and ambitious presence in the otherwise sterile boardroom. That's where she met Eleanor, who at the time was dating Henry and had just begun dipping her toes into the world of billion-dollar decisions and high society events. Eleanor, always kind and gracious, had taken a liking to Vanessa, unaware that beneath her soft-spoken compliments and shared lunch breaks was a storm of jealousy brewing. To Vanessa, Eleanor was everything she wasn't but wanted to be: loved, adored, secure. And now, with Eleanor heavily pregnant and distracted by baby showers and nursery plans, Vanessa saw a chance to take back the life she believed should have been hers all along. She started subtly, attending meetings Henry would be present at, accidentally bumping into him in the company's sleek glass elevator, offering insights and praise at just the right moments to stroke his ego. She dressed the part, never too obvious, never too loud, always polished, always alluring. Her conversations were casual, but loaded with double meanings. She knew how to tilt her head just enough to show interest, how to laugh at his jokes in a way Eleanor no longer did, simply because their relationship had grown into the kind of comfort that Vanessa now weaponized. She watched, waited, and tested the waters. When Henry began replying to her texts late at night, first for work, then for venting, Vanessa knew the door had cracked open. She just needed to push. Henry, flattered and emotionally distant from his wife, barely noticed the danger. Vanessa presented herself as someone who understood him in ways Eleanor, with her baby books and prenatal classes, no longer did. She made herself indispensable, professionally, emotionally, and soon, personally. Every compliment she gave was calculated, every touch rehearsed. She didn't just want to seduce Henry, she wanted to destroy Eleanor. The mansion, the name, the money, the status, it would all be hers. In Vanessa's mind, Eleanor had simply been keeping her seat warm. Now, she was ready to claim what she thought the universe owed her, and she was willing to go to any length, even betrayal, even poison, to get it. The seduction didn't happen all at once. It started with small, seemingly innocent gestures, Vanessa bringing Henry his favorite black coffee during late-night meetings, sending him motivational quotes when he looked stressed, laughing just a little too long at his dry jokes. Henry, caught in the whirlwind of investor deadlines, legal meetings, and expansion plans, barely had time to breathe, let alone notice that he was slowly becoming dependent on her presence. Where Eleanor was immersed in preparing the nursery, reading parenting books, and attending birthing classes, Vanessa played the perfect foil. She wasn't asking him to build cribs or look at wallpaper samples. She only asked how he was feeling. She leaned in close when she spoke, rested her hand lightly on his arm when she laughed, and made him feel seen in a way that he hadn't realized he was missing. To Henry, it felt harmless at first. Vanessa was just a loyal employee who admired him, something his ego, strained by stress and sleepless nights, desperately craved. When she offered to stay late and help with reports, he said yes without hesitation. One night, after hours of working together in his office, Vanessa brought out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "You look like you need to unwind," she said, her voice smooth as silk. He hesitated, then gave in. They drank. They laughed. They talked about nothing and everything. She told him she understood how exhausting it must be to carry so much weight on his shoulders. "You do so much for everyone else," she whispered. "Who takes care of you?" It was the kind of question Eleanor hadn't asked in months, not because she didn't care, but because her love was rooted in building a future, not stoking insecurity. That night was the beginning. The late meetings became frequent. The drinks turned into private dinners. They found excuses to be alone together, out of the office, in places no one would question. Henry began deleting messages, guarding his phone, justifying moments he never used to hide. Vanessa became his retreat, his distraction, the softness in a life that had grown hard and demanding. She wasn't just another woman, she was a calculated illusion of freedom and understanding. And Henry, blind to her ambition, stepped deeper into the web she wove, convinced he was in control. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't being seduced, he was being hunted. At first, Eleanor tried to ignore the shifts. She told herself that Henry was simply overwhelmed with work, that the long hours and missed dinners were temporary. She didn't want to be the kind of wife who nagged, especially not while pregnant. Still, she couldn't shake the sense that something was off. He had become guarded, distracted even when he was home. He used to talk to her about everything, deals, stress, ideas, but now his conversations were clipped, rushed, as if he couldn't get away from her fast enough. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter or nightstand, was always with him now, screen turned downward, locked tight. He jumped at notifications. He smiled at messages he didn't explain. Every time she asked about his day, he gave vague answers, claiming endless meetings or sudden emergencies at work. Eleanor's pregnancy made her more sensitive, more emotional. She told herself it was hormones, that she was overthinking. But deep down, a gnawing sense of dread was growing. The final push came one evening when she was folding laundry in their bedroom. As she sorted through Henry's jacket pockets before sending them to the dry cleaner, her fingers grazed something smooth and foreign. She pulled it out slowly, a lipstick tube, sleek in gold, in a shade of red she had never worn. Her heart dropped. It was unmistakably not hers. She stared at it in disbelief, as if trying to will it into something else, anything else. But there it was, evidence she could no longer ignore. When she confronted Henry that night, he barely blinked. He didn't panic, didn't apologize, he deflected. "Eleanor, you're 7 months pregnant," he said coolly. "You're tired. You're hormonal. Do you even hear yourself right now?" The way he said it made her feel foolish, irrational, unstable. She wanted to scream, but all she could do was stare at him, wondering who this man was and when he had become a stranger. That night, something inside her cracked. She stopped confiding in him. She stopped asking questions. The silence between them grew wider, colder. And in that silence, Eleanor began to feel more alone than she ever had in her life. The house that once felt like a home now felt like a stage, and she, the woman who was supposed to be cherished, was being quietly erased from her own story. Vanessa knew Henry wouldn't leave Eleanor while she was still carrying his child. For all his flaws, he had an image to protect, one of a devoted husband, a soon-to-be father, a man of honor. And Eleanor, despite the emotional distance between them, still had his name, his ring, and his child growing inside her. Vanessa hated that. She had already won Henry's attention, his desire, and most of his time. But it wasn't enough. She didn't want to be the other woman. She wanted to be the only woman. And to do that, Eleanor had to disappear, not physically, but emotionally, mentally. If she couldn't be pushed out, she had to be broken from within. That's when Vanessa devised her most dangerous scheme yet. She began by re-entering Eleanor's life under the pretense of reconciliation. One afternoon, she showed up at the Blackwell estate with a bouquet of white lilies and an apology. "I hate how distant we've become," she said sweetly, her voice laced with false sincerity. "I miss our friendship." Eleanor, emotionally drained and desperate for support, welcomed her back with cautious warmth. After all, they had shared years of connection, even if something had always felt slightly off. Vanessa quickly slipped into the role of the supportive friend, bringing homemade pastries, offering foot massages, and preparing herbal teas she claimed were calming for the baby. Eleanor, weary and trusting, never thought to question the contents of the tea. That's when the symptoms began. Subtle at first. Dizziness that made her grip door frames. Moments of confusion, forgetting where she placed things, losing track of time. Then came the blackouts. Once, she woke up on the bathroom floor, bruised and disoriented. She told herself it was just the stress of pregnancy. The doctors had warned her that hormonal shifts could impact her memory and emotions. Vanessa was there every time, feigning concern, writing down what she witnessed, asking carefully loaded questions like, "Do you feel safe being alone, or have you considered postpartum depression could start early?" What Eleanor didn't know was that Vanessa was documenting every symptom, every misstep, and every shaky word. She took photos, Eleanor asleep on the couch midday, Eleanor crying in the nursery, Eleanor fumbling her words. Vanessa kept a digital folder labeled evidence on her private laptop. Her goal was simple: paint Eleanor as an unfit mother before the baby was even born. With enough proof, she could push Henry into believing his wife needed psychiatric help. She whispered doubts into his ear in passing. "She seemed off today," or "I'm worried about her, really." Slowly, Henry began to question what he saw with his own eyes. After all, Vanessa was always so composed, and Eleanor looked like she was unraveling. Vanessa didn't just want to replace Eleanor, she wanted to erase her. And with each drop of sedative she stirred into Eleanor's tea, she believed she was one step closer to doing exactly that. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, crystal chandeliers casting a soft glow over the sea of gowns and tuxedos. The annual Blackwell Foundation Charity Gala was one of the most anticipated events of the year, and Eleanor had done everything in her power to appear strong, put together, and glowing. Despite the fatigue that clung to her bones and the fog that clouded her thoughts, she stood tall in a flowing emerald dress that hugged her pregnant belly, her lips curved in a practiced smile. Vanessa, of course, was there too, hovering in the background in a stunning black gown, ever the loyal friend and helper, staying close enough to Henry to draw attention but far enough to maintain her carefully crafted mask. Eleanor tried to stay focused, but something felt wrong. Her vision blurred as the lights above seemed to swirl and merge. She blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself, clutching a flute of sparkling water. A cold sweat formed on her neck. She reached out to grip the edge of the dessert table, but her hand missed. Then the room spun violently. Gasps echoed around her as Eleanor crumpled to the floor, clutching her stomach. Henry rushed to her side, panic finally breaking through his composed exterior. At the hospital, doctors swarmed around her. Monitors beeped, nurses whispered, and Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness. Hours passed. Then came the questions, polite, careful, professional, but strange. Do you take any medications, Mrs. Blackwell? Any history of substance use? When she insisted no, their faces grew tight. The toxicology report had revealed traces of sedatives, heavy ones. Drugs she had never heard of, let alone consumed. Eleanor stared at them, horrified. I've never taken anything, she said, but her voice was weak, her body betraying her with trembling hands and a fractured memory. Meanwhile, Vanessa seized her moment. She hovered in the hospital corridor beside Henry, her expression tight with faux concern. Henry, I don't want to say this, she whispered, but I've seen her declining for weeks. The crying spells. The confusion. What if it's something serious? What if she's a danger to herself, or the baby? Henry, shaken and unsure, didn't know what to think. He remembered Eleanor's strange behavior. The forgetfulness. The tears. The fall. Could Vanessa be right? Later that night, as Eleanor lay half asleep in her hospital bed, she heard two doctors just outside her room. Their voices were low, but the words struck like lightning. We may need to consider a psychiatric consult, one said. She's showing signs of prenatal psychosis. Eleanor's breath caught. No. This wasn't hormones. This wasn't depression. This was sabotage. A cold clarity settled in her chest. Someone was doing this to her. Someone wanted her gone, institutionalized, labeled unstable. And that someone had been close, very close, all along. Her hands curled into fists beneath the hospital blanket. She knew now. Vanessa wasn't her friend. She was her executioner in disguise. And Eleanor wasn't crazy. She was being hunted. Eleanor lay in the hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic thick in the air, the soft beeping of machines a constant reminder of how fragile her world had become. But this time, she didn't cry. She didn't panic. She didn't argue with the doctors when they suggested more tests or when they gently asked about her mental state. She nodded slowly, played the part of the confused, exhausted, emotionally frayed pregnant woman. Her eyes drifted blankly as they spoke. She whispered things like maybe I'm forgetting things and I don't know what's wrong with me. She let them believe she was broken, all while her mind worked sharply beneath the calm exterior. If she was going to survive this, if she was going to protect her child, she had to outplay the person trying to destroy her. And for that, she needed an ally. That ally came in the form of Clara Walsh, a soft-spoken nurse in her early 30s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Clara was the first person who actually listened. She noticed the inconsistencies, the fact that Eleanor's vitals didn't match her reported symptoms, the way the lab reports kept getting updated without Eleanor's knowledge, the whisper of something dark beneath the surface. Late one night, when the hospital wing was quiet and Eleanor was wide awake in the dim light of her room, she finally spoke up. Someone's drugging me, she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. Clara didn't dismiss her. She pulled a chair close and leaned in. Tell me everything. Over the next few days, they worked quietly, secretly. Clara began keeping a separate log of Eleanor's vitals and medications, double-checking everything administered to her. She arranged for private blood samples to be tested at an outside lab, ones that wouldn't be shared with hospital administrators. She slipped a small, motion-activated camera into the corner of Eleanor's room, disguised in a flower arrangement. They both knew it wasn't the hospital staff doing this, it had to be someone with access, someone trusted. At the same time, Eleanor's mother, Margaret, came to visit. A sharp, fiercely protective woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing, Margaret took one look at her daughter and knew something was wrong. She didn't believe the stories about confusion or emotional instability. Eleanor had always been strong, balanced, and far too self-aware to slip into madness overnight. When Eleanor confided in her, Margaret didn't flinch. I knew that woman was poison the moment I met her, she said, referring to Vanessa. But don't worry, sweetheart. She picked the wrong family to mess with. With Clara's help and Margaret's quiet support, Eleanor began piecing together the truth. She studied her own patterns, wrote everything down, and waited. Vanessa thought she had one. But Eleanor wasn't the fragile, fading woman she believed her to be. She was calm. She was alert. And she was ready. The next move wouldn't be Vanessa's, it would be Eleanor's. And it would be war. With Eleanor confined to the hospital and whispers of her instability quietly circulating, Vanessa made her move. She arrived at the Blackwell estate with 2 designer suitcases, an air of sorrow on her face, and a twisted smile tucked behind her well-rehearsed sympathy. She told Henry she only wanted to help, that he didn't have to face everything alone. "You need support, and the baby will need someone here if things don't improve," she said softly, placing a manicured hand on his chest. Henry, emotionally drained, confused, and weighed down by guilt, didn't resist. He nodded, unsure of anything anymore, and allowed her to stay. Within days, Vanessa began her quiet conquest of Eleanor's world. The nursery Eleanor had lovingly painted in soft sage green was repainted in white and gold, the delicate lace curtains replaced with sleek blackout shades. The scent of Eleanor's lavender candles was gone, replaced by Vanessa's signature perfume that clung to every room like a claim. She entered Eleanor's bedroom, the space once filled with warmth and quiet laughter, and made it her own. Her clothes filled the walk-in closet, her jewelry glinted from the vanity, and her high heels lined the shelves where Eleanor's slippers used to be. Most chilling of all, Vanessa burned Eleanor's framed photos in the fireplace one night while sipping wine, watching the edges curl and blacken with a satisfied smirk. The household staff, long loyal to Eleanor, were stunned into silence. When they questioned her presence, she smiled coldly and said, "I'm the new Mrs. Blackwell now. I think it's time you adjusted." Some left. Others stayed quiet out of fear or confusion. Henry, for his part, drifted through the house like a ghost, avoiding conflict, too ashamed to confront what was happening. Vanessa took advantage of every moment. She snapped photos of herself in Eleanor's favorite reading chair, holding baby gifts addressed to Mom, and posted them to her curated social media with cryptic captions like "New beginnings" and "Every family looks different, but love is the same." The world outside began to speculate, and soon the tabloids picked it up. Who is the mystery woman staying at the Blackwell estate? Where is Eleanor Blackwell? Vanessa didn't answer directly. She didn't have to. With each post, each whisper, she solidified her position. In her mind, she had won. Eleanor was gone. The house, the man, the life, it was all hers now. And she had no intention of ever giving it back. Done, the subtle poisoning, the manipulation, the lies, had left behind traces, and they collected each one meticulously. Clara, with her hospital badge and discreet manner, documented every medication Eleanor had been given. The third-party lab results confirmed what the hospital wouldn't admit, high levels of a sedative that should never have been in a pregnant woman's system. Meanwhile, Margaret pulled phone records, security footage, and gathered witness accounts from staff who had quietly resigned from the Blackwell estate. With everything in hand, they turned to the one person Eleanor had once trusted without question, Detective Lucas Reed. Lucas had been a close friend of Eleanor's since college, once her debate partner and, for a short time, something more. Though life had taken them in different directions, the moment he heard what had happened, he dropped everything. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always 3 steps ahead, Lucas had a reputation for following cases that others left unsolved, and for being relentless when something didn't sit right. And nothing about Eleanor's case sat right. When Clara and Margaret laid out the evidence across his dining room table, lab results, video clips from Eleanor's hospital room, screenshots of Vanessa's posts, Lucas didn't hesitate. "We're going to take her down," he said. Lucas began by digging into Vanessa Hart's past, something Henry had apparently never thought to do. What he found stunned even him. Vanessa had bounced from city to city, always involved with powerful, wealthy men. In each case, there was a pattern: sudden changes in behavior, mysterious health declines, accusations of instability. One man, a real estate mogul in Miami, had died of a seizure just months after ending things with her. His case had been ruled accidental until Lucas traced the pharmacy receipts under Vanessa's alias. There was a trail of shadows behind her, and it led straight to Henry. Knowing Vanessa wouldn't fall for a direct confrontation, Lucas set a trap. He convinced one of Eleanor's former staff members, someone Vanessa believed she had manipulated, to reach out and pretend to be concerned about Eleanor's health. The staff member told Vanessa they'd found something strange in Eleanor's belongings and offered to meet and hand it over. Vanessa, arrogant and desperate to protect her scheme, showed up in full makeup and designer heels. What she didn't know was that the tote bag she carried, loaned to her under the guise of a fashionable gift, had a hidden camera sewn inside the lining, courtesy of Lucas. During the meeting, Vanessa made a critical mistake. Thinking she was alone and untouchable, she admitted to giving Eleanor something to help her sleep and brushed off the risks. "She's too fragile to be a mother anyway," she sneered. "I'm doing Henry a favor." The camera caught every word, every smug expression, every damning admission. Lucas watched the footage with grim satisfaction. They finally had her. Vanessa Hart was no longer the cunning woman in control, she was now the suspect in a rapidly building criminal case. The truth had finally started to crack the polished facade she had built. And it was only the beginning of her unraveling. Eleanor's return to the Blackwell estate was nothing short of cinematic. Without any announcement or warning, she stepped through the grand front doors with the poised elegance that had once made her the envy of high society. But this Eleanor was different, calm, collected, and armed with an unshakable resolve. Gone was the vulnerable woman who had collapsed under the weight of betrayal and sabotage. Now, she carried with her something far more powerful than beauty or charm, undeniable proof. Clutched in her hand was a USB drive containing the damning footage captured by Detective Lucas Reed's hidden camera, the final piece in a puzzle that would shatter Vanessa's carefully constructed world. Henry was in the study when she arrived, pacing nervously, his face drawn and pale. He barely recognized the woman who entered, her eyes sharp, her stance unyielding. Without a word, Eleanor approached the desk and placed the USB drive in front of him. She pressed play. The video flickered to life on the large monitor, and Vanessa's smug voice filled the room as she confessed to drugging Eleanor, to destroying her reputation, to trying to ruin her life. Henry's eyes widened in disbelief. His hands trembled, and for the first time in months, he was speechless. The man who had once wielded control now seemed like a victim of his own blindness. News of Eleanor's return and the explosive footage spread like wildfire. The media descended on the Blackwell estate, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Headlines blared, "Billionaire's mistress exposed, poison plot unveiled, pregnant wife's courage shakes high society, and Henry Blackwell's affair ends in scandal." Vanessa's social media accounts were flooded with hate and betrayal. The public, once captivated by her beauty and charm, now saw her as a villainous figure intent on destruction. Within days, authorities arrested Vanessa on charges of attempted poisoning, fraud, and criminal intimidation. Her bail was denied, and she was swiftly removed from the glamorous life she had so ruthlessly pursued. Henry, meanwhile, faced the harshest fallout of all. His reputation was in tatters, not just because of the affair, but because of his failure to protect his wife and unborn child. Investors pulled back from Blackwell Innovations, and board members demanded answers. The man who had been untouchable was suddenly vulnerable, haunted by guilt and public shame. Eleanor, however, stood tall amid the chaos. With the support of her mother and Detective Reed, she filed for divorce, demanding full custody of their child. She was determined to reclaim her life and protect her baby from the shadows Vanessa had cast. The courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers eager for justice and closure. Eleanor's voice, steady and resolute, echoed through the halls as she detailed the betrayal and the years of suffering she had endured. This was not just a legal battle, it was a reclaiming of power, a declaration that she would no longer be a victim. And as the judge granted her full custody and finalized the divorce, Eleanor felt a surge of freedom and hope. The nightmare was over. The future, her future, had just begun. Vanessa's fall was swift and unforgiving. The moment the footage and evidence were made public, prosecutors wasted no time in charging her with multiple felonies, attempted poisoning, identity theft, and criminal intimidation. The courtroom drama that followed was a spectacle, but behind the scenes, Vanessa's life unraveled with terrifying speed. Her once glamorous image, carefully cultivated through social media posts and influencer endorsements, crumbled as sponsors dropped her like a hot potato. What had been a thriving personal brand built on charm and luxury became a cautionary tale of deceit and cruelty. Her followers turned into critics, flooding her accounts with messages of disgust and betrayal. She wasn't just losing a trial, she was losing everything. Henry's empire felt the shockwaves too. Blackwell Innovations stock plummeted as investors reacted to the scandal surrounding their founder. Partners hesitated, contracts were paused, and the company's once sterling reputation took a severe hit. The media frenzy painted Henry as a man who allowed his personal failings to jeopardize his professional legacy. The pressure mounted from all sides, forcing Henry to step down temporarily while the board sought to steady the sinking ship. The billionaire who once seemed invincible was now fighting to salvage what little remained. Meanwhile, Vanessa's legal team fought desperately for bail, but the judge saw her as a flight risk and a danger to Eleanor and her unborn child. Bail was denied, and Vanessa was remanded to custody, her glamorous life reduced to cold, lonely jail cells. The stark contrast between her former life of opulence and her current reality was a harsh lesson in karma's unforgiving hand. Amid the chaos, Eleanor became a beacon of resilience. Her story of survival, strength, and grace under fire captured the hearts of thousands across social media and news outlets. Hashtags like #JusticeForEleanor and #StrongMoms trended worldwide as people rallied behind her courage. Interviews, guest appearances, and heartfelt messages poured in, transforming Eleanor from a victim into an inspiration. She was no longer just a name on a scandalous headline, she was a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever faced betrayal and come out stronger. Karma had struck hard, but Eleanor stood taller than ever, ready to embrace the future on her own terms. Months after the storm had passed and the dust began to settle, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby girl whom she named Hope, a name that captured everything she had fought for and everything she believed the future could hold. The delivery was smooth, surrounded by the quiet support of her mother, Margaret, and a small circle of trusted friends who had stood by her through the darkest moments. Holding Hope in her arms, Eleanor felt a profound sense of renewal. The pain of betrayal and loss still lingered, but in that fragile newborn, she found a reason to heal and move forward. Determined to transform her experience into something meaningful, Eleanor launched a foundation dedicated to supporting pregnant women facing crisis, whether through abuse, mental health struggles, or other challenges. The Eleanor Blackwell Foundation quickly gained traction, partnering with hospitals, counselors, and community organizations to provide resources, counseling, and safe spaces for women who felt powerless. Eleanor spoke openly about her story, using her platform to raise awareness and break the silence around pregnancy-related trauma and emotional abuse. Her voice, once silenced by fear and manipulation, now carried strength and hope. Henry, meanwhile, was in rehab, grappling with his mistakes and seeking some measure of redemption. From the quiet confines of the facility, he sent Eleanor letters filled with remorse and longing, begging for forgiveness and a chance to make amends. But Eleanor, while compassionate, knew that healing didn't require reconciliation. She chose peace over revenge, understanding that forgiving herself was more important than mending broken promises. She read his words, acknowledged his struggle, but kept her focus on the future she was building for herself and Hope. Her journey was not about reclaiming a lost love but rediscovering who she was beneath the pain and betrayal. "I lost a man, but I found myself," she told a crowd at a charity gala months later, her voice steady and sure. The audience erupted in applause, moved by her resilience and honesty. Eleanor's story wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about strength, courage, and the power of new beginnings. And as she looked down at Hope sleeping peacefully beside her, she knew that the hardest battles often lead to the brightest dawns. My dearest Hope. By the time you read this, you will be 18, an age full of dreams, questions, and the beginning of your own journey into the world. I want you to know everything about where you came from, not to burden you with pain, but to arm you with truth and strength. Life isn't always kind or fair. Sometimes, the people we trust most may hurt us deeply, and the world can try to knock us down when we least expect it. But it's how we rise that defines us. Your father and I had a story filled with love, hope, and mistakes. There were moments of joy, but also moments shadowed by betrayal. I won't hide the painful parts from you, because hiding truth only weakens the soul. Instead, I want you to understand that even in the darkest times, you have the power to stand tall, to fight for yourself, and to reclaim your happiness. It's okay to feel hurt, but never let that pain control who you become. You come from a line of survivors, women and men who faced storms and didn't just endure, but grew stronger because of them. Remember, strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising every time you do. Your worth is not determined by others' choices or by the hardships you face, but by the kindness, courage, and love you carry within you. When you read this, know that I love you more than words can say. I fought fiercely to protect you because you are my greatest hope and my brightest future. No matter what, you are never alone. Stand tall, my beautiful girl. The world may try to crush you, but you will rise, and you will shine. With all my love. Mom.